There is something wrong, I noticed here. We'll tell you, inshallah. No? He will text me. Huh? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين. وإذ جعلنا البيت مثابة للناس وأمنا واتخذوا من مقام إبراهيم مصلى وعهدنا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل أن طهرا بيتي للطائفين والعاكفين والركع السجود. وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا بلدا آمنا وارزق أهله من الثمرات من آمن منهم بالله واليوم الآخر قال ومن كفر فأمتعه قليلا ثم أضطره إلى عذاب النار وبئس المصير. وإذ يرفع إبراهيم القواعد من البيت وإسماعيل ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. صدق الله العظيم.
تكبير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Jazakum Allah khairan as always, Sheikh Hassan, for your recitation. Sometimes I wish that the recitation wasn't that beautiful because the verses that he read completely distracted me. Now I feel like talking about the verses that he talked about. So, Jazakum Allah khairan. So, as we gather today, inshallah, today is the kickoff of Ask Me Anything. That's what the name of the program is, inshallah. Every Saturday between Maghrib and Isha until notice. Maybe there's going to be time change and then we can give a new timing. But please, starting from next week, everybody tell at least 3 people. So, inshallah, we can bring in as many people and as youth. It's youth specific. It's specifically for the youth, but families and adults and parents, everybody's welcome. But if it is that you have an opportunity to tell youth, please bring them in because we actually have questions that have come in. I have about 15 questions now. So I'm going to cut my intro a little short as to the method of the madness behind the name and why this is important and what we can take away from it, inshallah. The first thing is just starting off with the name. Ask Me Anything doesn't mean that I have the answer to everything. Nobody has the answer to everything. Ask Me Anything is more the gesture of you can come to the masjid and feel free to ask anything you like, and if you don't, we also have a system set up, mashallah, a robust system by the ICW administration and Brother Faisal spearheading this with Brother Hisham of having just something very simple as a Google Doc, and you can scan a QR code and you can ask an anonymous question. It's important to, if you want to be anonymous, to stay anonymous, it's beautiful as long as you ask the question. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in a hadith said that the shifa, that the cure for arrogance is for ignorance is a question, asking a question, right? Innama shifa'ul ayy. He said, indeed, no question about it, that the cure for ignorance is as-su'al, right? And there's a whole entire hadith that this is the tail end of a hadith of why Muhammad said this. But what more do we need when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When your slave asks about me, tell him that I'm close. Why am I mentioning this? Questions are the door to knowledge. Questions are the door to tranquility. How many of us had a question that we had at night and we tossed and turned all night and maybe lost some sleep because we wanted to answer a question, right? One of the greatest questions that people may have, it's unfortunate, but why are we here as human beings? Why are we on this earth? Alhamdulillah, the Muslim can sleep comfortably because we know our mission, we know Allah is our creator, we know that there's a Jannah, there's a Jahannam, we know that we have to stand in front of Allah, we know that what we accumulate in this world, so on, is a sign of our success. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran shows us the importance of questioning, because when He tells us the most important question is when the slave asks about Allah, what should Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's answer be? Allah gives Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the answer to give to them, right? فَإِنِّي قَرِيب. Tell them that Allah is close. The wisdom behind saying Allah is close is, that would be, if you were to answer it in one word, if somebody's asking about Allah, He's close. Meaning that He's closer to you than your jugular vein, as Allah mentions in the Quran also, right? أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein, right? The thing that can instantly take your life away if it's severed, right? يَسْأَلُونَكَ, we hear this all the time, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَنفَالِ, in the beginning of Surah Al-Anfal. About 17 places in the Quran with this يَسْأَلُونَكَ we see. And this يَسْأَلُونَكَ in the Arabic language means that they are asking. It's a present, future tense question, right? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They're asking you about alcohol and maisir and gambling. And this is very much related to our topic. Look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. They're asking you about khamr and maisir, about alcohol and gambling. Tell them that in these two are ithm, meaning a sin. And there's manafi'u lin-nasi, and there's benefits in people for it. Look how honest Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. He's saying, yes, alcohol has benefits in it. Of course He does. But it's still haram because Allah says so. And He says, the turmoil that it causes outweighs, is much worse than the benefit that it brings. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about alcohol and about gambling. And He told us that there's also benefit in those things too. But He also told us that the harm of these two outweighs whatever good it can bring, and it's haram, right? Why is this so important? Because a lot of people, many young people, but this happens to us in our formative years, especially if something's beneficial, then why would it be haram? Marijuana is so beneficial for people. People say, right? It's good for anxiety in some people, it's good for cancer, it's good for glaucoma, it's good for all these things, right? فيها منافع للناس. Of course, there's benefit. Nobody said there's no benefit. But Allah is going to be the decider what, even though it's all benefits, Allah is the only one to decide if it's haram or not, right? But this is the wisdom that comes about by questioning. And the last thing I'll say is, this is a question-answer forum. I'll give a little intro in the beginning based on the questions that I received. But one of the greatest things that questions bring to us is ma'rifah, is a full understanding. And starting from ma'rifatullah, understanding who Allah is, right? We as Muslims don't believe in asking questions to be antagonizing. We believe to ask questions to seek knowledge first and foremost of Allah. Who is Allah? How many of us, if somebody asked us, because we love Allah more than anything, and we love Rasulullah more than our own mother and our father and our children and everything in this world, if someone was to ask you, tell me about Allah, what would you say? You pray to Allah 5 times a day, you worship Him 5 times a day at least. You stand up 20 raka'at every year to Allah. Tell me about Allah. That's the beautiful thing about the verse. You start off with, فَإِنِّي قَرِيب. Allah is close, first and foremost. Right? And then you can start off with the whole protocol you have of explaining to people who Allah and His Rasul and Islam is. Right? So I am actually going to simply keep it this simple and just open up the Google Docs and start off with the questions, inshallah. And I'm going to give precedence to questions that are sent into me. And then if some of the questions are repetitive, I'll basically go through the crowd and see if they have any questions. The first question I have is, and just for future references, inshallah, if you have, everybody has their own relationship with their children, and everybody speaks to their children about certain issues. And some people start their children off by talking to them about gender roles and everything that happens, and why our voices change and why all that happens at a young age. And that's beautiful, because our children have to hear it from our parents. We don't believe in Islam that children should learn about maturity and puberty from their peers or people in school, especially if they go to a public school. We believe that the first one that children should hear about puberty and formation of the human body and its maturity and everything else should come from the parents. So this, especially since it's intended for youth, if you're uncomfortable with certain topics, we're going to be discussing the LGBTQ topic again. We're going to be discussing gender roles. We're going to be discussing what happens behind the bedroom or in the bedroom in a halal way. But if you're still uncomfortable with your children being here, I'm just giving you a heads up right now to escape. Or you can stay. It'd probably be better to stay, inshallah, because I'm going to keep it as dini as possible, of course. Look, there's no matter, nothing's wrong with talking about anything in this world as long as it's done with nobility. Muhammad ﷺ answered everything. Allah answered everything in the Quran that we need to. Muhammad ﷺ answered it, but with nobility, right? So if Allah and His Rasul can talk about certain things, yes, we should preface certain things with children, with 5-year-old and 6 years old. Yes, they have to start understanding about puberty and sex from that age, but in a very, very simple way. And if we want to go through a simple protocol that I follow, that I agree with, which I think is very robust and a perfect way to start off, so then by the time they're 9 years old, you can talk to them about everything without being shy. We can discuss that too, inshallah. So the first question, let's start off with something light, inshallah. If the prophets were created sinless, meaning they had no sin, how was Adam alayhi salam able to eat from the tree? That's a great question. First and foremost, Adam alayhi salam was taught by Allah the names of everything, right? As Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. When Shaitan came to Adam alayhi salam, he knew what was happening, but he was obviously jealous and he was arrogant. That why did Allah create a being that's made of clay and I'm made of fire, right? So Allah told Adam alayhi salam not to go near the tree. Yes. So what's the sneakiness that Shaitan did? He said, no, the reason why Allah told you that is, if you want to be angels, then you don't have to go to the tree. إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ مَلَكَيْنِ. Right? As Allah mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, in many instances of the Quran. So Adam alayhi salam, he said, okay, what's the wisdom? What's between the lines here? Adam alayhi salam was not or did not understand the form of trickery that exists, deception and lying. He only understood the truth. He didn't understand the concept of deception. Remember, that actually has to be taught. That's when he was taught the concept of deception. But he was thinking whatever somebody's going to tell me is going to be the truth, right? Which is why lying and deception is directly from Shaitan. When any of us feel inclined to deceive or lie or sugarcoat or whatever the case is, sugarcoating is a little different, but know that that is exactly the following of waswas of Shaitan and is manifesting through you. Sins are very, very different, right? But lying and deception is one of those things. So to answer your question, Adam alayhi salam was ma'asum, but he was deceived by Shaitan. Great question, thank you. And these questions range from a whole different type of topics here. I'm confused about qasr, meaning shortening my prayer while I'm traveling. Can I combine Dhuhr and Asr when traveling and Maghrib and Isha while traveling? What we understand from the wealth of ahadith of Rasulullah and also from the Quran is I want you to imagine there's Quran, there's Hadith, there's lives of the Sahaba. The job of fiqh is to do what's called istinbat, meaning extrapolation from the verses of the Quran and the Hadith, and then we pave the way for people to learn that that is what we call fiqh. So fiqh, just so we are clear, is the bodily way, physically how to worship Allah. Aqidah and Iman is inside of here. We always hear people saying Aqidah or Aqa'id, right? Aqidah is in your heart, that you believe in Allah. And you believe Muhammad is the final messenger, and he sends prophets, and he sends angels, and he sends books. That's a concept, that's an idea that fuels your actions, what we call fiqh, right? Fiqh are the how-tos of Islam. So how do we, if we're traveling, we understand that we can shorten the 4 rak'at into 2 rak'at. Fajr stays the same. Fajr stays 2 rak'at fard. Maghrib stays the same. So Dhuhr, Asr and Isha, when you're traveling, become 2 rak'at. The next question is now can you combine? Because we have narrations of the hadith of Rasulullah of combining, and then we have the 4 major schools of thought, and there's many other schools of thought, but the 4 major schools of thought of combining, right? So Imam al-Shafi'i and Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Imam Malik are of the opinion that you can combine Dhuhr and Asr either at Dhuhr time and Asr time. Now what's afdal is different from amongst the fuqaha, which is called Jam' al-Ta'khir, meaning to delay Dhuhr and Asr to Asr time, or bringing it forward, which is Taqdeem, meaning you would pray Dhuhr and Asr at Dhuhr time. Cool? So, Dhuhr and Asr, and you have Maghrib and Isha. Now, what if it's Maghrib time, and I want to pray Maghrib and Isha? If you're combining, you can actually do both. The only difference of opinion is as far as which one would be even better. The earlier prayer, meaning let's say I travel to Ohio, and it's Maghrib time now. If I want to pray Maghrib and Isha, I can pray Maghrib and Isha at Maghrib time, or I can pray Maghrib and Isha at Isha time. Same thing with Dhuhr and Asr. I'm traveling to New York. I can either pray Dhuhr and Asr at Dhuhr time, I can pray Dhuhr and Asr at Asr time. Except for the people of Kufa. Imam Hanifa rahimahullah and his students of Kufa, a majority of them are of the opinion that the only time Jam' is allowed, combining Salah is allowed at the end of Dhuhr time and the beginning of Asr time, and at the end of Maghrib time and at the beginning of Isha time, right? So combining whatever madhab it is that you follow, or whatever it is that your local sheikh or your imam has taught you, is what you should follow, inshallah. Also, because that leads us to our next question. Somebody asked, more questions are coming in, sorry. Should I what? I will take, I'm just going to answer a few really important ones here. Somebody asked, do I have to follow a madhab? I mean, we hear this question all the time. It's an important question because there's lots of knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge. And you can ask a question 100 times. We could benefit 100 different ways. It doesn't matter. So the general principle in the Sharia is, and I want you to imagine, there's chapters of fiqh. So we have something called maxims and axioms in the Sharia, like everything else. Just like in legality, you have a maxim and you have an axiom. A maxim is what? It's one term that will define the ruling of many, many verses and many, many ahadith. So let's say you have 1,000 ahadith and you have 100 verses that have to do with necessity, right? Meaning if someone is in a very dire state, someone's starving and they only have pork to eat, are they allowed to eat pork if they're starving? What do you guys think? Yes. And it's a qa'idah fiqhiyya. This subject in the Sharia is called al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, meaning maxims of principles in Islamic jurisprudence. And everyone has heard this before. Ad-dururat tubihu al-mahdhurat. When you're in the situation of a durura, dire need and necessity, which was once haram for you becomes halal for you. The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when the world becomes open up for you, there's so much available, then the sharia restricts you a little bit. And when the world constricts you and restricts you, and you don't have too much room to move, then the sharia opens up for you. In a similar way, there's a maxim of following a madhab from amongst the madhabs in the sharia, right? Al-ammi la madhaba lahu. The ammi, the am person who's a lay person that's not a specialist, actually doesn't have a madhab. But what does that mean? This part is very important. There's no cutoff point here. What that means is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. That means the lay person, if they don't know, all they have to do is ask the person of knowledge or the imam of the masjid. Whatever the imam of the masjid, the person of knowledge tells them, that's what they follow. Right? But every culture is different and every household is different. Let's say from a young age, my parents gave me a book, a basic book in Maliki fiqh, for instance, or Shafi'i fiqh, or Hanbali fiqh, or my father teaches me Hanbali fiqh, or Hanafi fiqh, right? Or I go to a school and the school teaches me Hanafi fiqh, it teaches me Hanbali fiqh, Shafi'i fiqh, whatever it may be. Or I'm at a course, I want to enlist at a course, inshallah, which is $300 a year for Shafi'i fiqh, for instance. In that situation, it's very, very important for you to stick to that madhab. Because now you started the path to knowledge, and when you start the path to knowledge, it's very, very important to adhere to a madhab, because what ends up happening, as Imam Abu Hanifa says, one day, when you start studying fiqh, one day, and if you're not restrained or restricted, another ra'i, another position becomes good to you, and then the third day, another position becomes different to you and different, and at the end of the week, you didn't practice anything. You were just confused, and shaitan uses that and does waswas until you turn away from the deen, wal-'iyadhu billah. Right? Causes confusion. So to answer that person's question, inshallah, it's not absolutely fard to follow a madhab. But if you begin on the path of studying knowledge in the institution that you're going through gives you a madhab to study, then stick to it. Right? And if you happen to be, let's say that I'm Hanafi, and I'm, when we travel, we elect an amir. If there's 3 people, we elect an amir. Right? That we're traveling. It's a very good sunnah to practice. And let's just say the amir is a Shafi'i and he's combining his prayers at Dhuhr time, and I'm Hanafi, for instance, and I can't combine at that time. Can't, I'm putting in quotes because just specifically for that madhab, right? What's more important now is that you're with the jama'ah and you follow the jama'ah. And you stick with the jama'ah because the unity of the jama'ah is much more important than following a madhab. It's not undermining a madhab. But just to let you know, somebody who is actually in the past, who is a Hanafi or a Shafi'i or a Hanbali or a Maliki, means somebody who specialized in that madhab and understood the usul, the principles of extrapolating in that madhab, then they became, for instance, Hanafi or Shafi'i or Maliki or whatever the case is. But the layperson, just to make your life a lot easier, if you're ever confused, ask a person of knowledge, because that's all Allah is expecting from us. He's not expecting all of us to study a book from cover to cover in fiqh. It's legality. If you open the old books of fiqh, it's like opening up a legal text, which is almost decoded or coded, and you have to decode it through the language. Not any person can pick it up and start reading it, right? So I hope that answers your question. Another topic, inshallah, is a very important question. Somebody may think that it was a troll question, but it actually, I get this question probably on a monthly basis. I will answer that one too, yes. There is a Sunni Shia one here actually. How do I tell my parents that I'm gay? How do I tell my parents that I'm gay? I know that it might not be allowed in Islam, but I strongly feel this way, and if Allah created me this way, meaning gay, He will also forgive me as He is the most forgiving and the most merciful. Right? Of course. First and foremost, we have to understand that Allah doesn't create people gay. I understand what the person's saying, and if that person is listening or that's here, I'm not challenging that person as of right now. What I'm saying is, we have to fix our vernacular a little bit to understand context of the Sharia. Allah doesn't create people gay, right? Homosexuality, or gay here, but we'll refer to as homosexuality, are divided into two parts in the Sharia. There are thoughts and tendencies that are homosexual in manner, and then there's acting upon the impulses of homosexuality. The same way, after puberty, males and females have impulses of sexuality towards each other. We just don't give in to those impulses until we're married, right? That is the Islamic way of doing things, right? So, to answer the question, if the person says that Allah made me this way, is it allowed for me? I'm going to answer the parents thing in a little bit. The first thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to charge you with anything as far as sins if you think about it, or if you have homosexual thoughts and tendencies and you don't act upon it and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually rewarding you for that. Look how merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Look at the hadith of Rasulullah, which is a lengthy hadith. But if you think of doing something good, you make the intention and you don't do it, Allah gives you the reward for it. If you thought of doing something haram and you didn't do it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the reward for it. It's a win-win situation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just have to be able to see things for what they are. So to add on to what the individual had also asked, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving and merciful. Of course He is. Of course Allah is. But we don't want to use that the way other faiths have used that to give a false understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also. We don't want to be one of those people that sin in front of other people especially and say, oh, Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. That's very, very important. Yes, Allah is Ghafurur Rahim, but Allah is also Al-Hakim. And Allah is also Al-Qahar and Jabbar. We can't just take one attribute of Allah and spread it unjustly to everybody and not teach them that Allah is the Muntaqim. Allah also gets revenge for those people who are not loyal to Him. And that's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah preserve us and protect us. Right? And if there were no ramifications, if there was no punishment, then the Hitlers and the Stalins of the world, where's the justice for them? If one of the greatest blessings that Allah has created for humanity is Jahannam. If there was only Jannah, and that's it, you can kill 1 million people, you can kill 300,000 people, whatever the case is, and I'm going to Jannah, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also created Jahannam to let us know that if all else fails and all safety measures have failed, then beware of Jahannam because it's there. The last thing I'll mention is the person asked, how should I tell my parents? The first thing is, we live in a culture now where people, which started about 5 years ago, which is known as like a coming out party, which is known as, YouTube. On YouTube, people would take videos of themselves calling their parents and coming out to them about their homosexuality and recording the reaction and all of that kind of stuff. Many of you guys have probably seen it. It was a really big thing. It still is, but it isn't. It's going down because there's no need for it anymore. It's very much accepted. But one thing you have to understand is, number one, if you feel the inclination to tell your parents, please beware that what was the culture originally. It takes a little bit of wisdom. What is the culture that you had with your parents before you're going to give them this news? Did your parents ever talk to you about sexuality in your life? If they didn't, it probably isn't a good idea to talk to your parents about this. You should probably go seek, and this is now considered controversial. In Islam, we believe that you have to seek a counselor if you're having homosexual thoughts and tendencies. It's not a sin, though, to have those thoughts and those feelings. That itself is considered hate speech now to say. That no, it is a dilemma, it is an issue. It's not the way Allah created us, right? And there's a deeper understanding of that too. Why people even temporarily have those feelings and thoughts, right? So getting back to the parents portion, it depends what relationship and what culture you have with your parents. A better thing to probably do is talk to a specialist who's an upright Muslim that is not just going to tell you what you want to hear, but actually let you know what is halal and what is haram, and not going to waver in his principles or her principles, and still help you seek help or therapy. And let's just say that nothing works. I know an individual who actually has a YouTube channel and has channels who's actually homosexual. He's a Muslim. He's a practicing Muslim. He's a homosexual, but homosexual. He never got married. And he tells gay Muslims how to navigate through being gay, if nothing else worked, and not falling into haram. It's actually a great service, and it's very difficult for that person to probably do that, but he did it. He said, I tried everything, nothing worked for me. I still have these thoughts, these tendencies. I have no inclination towards women, so I'm going to start a channel to help people like me so they don't fall into haram. So this person actually understands very well. He's not saying that it's halal. He clearly says it's haram if you act upon this. And all of that, but some people have those thoughts and tendencies. And if all else fails, then guess what your test is? Your test is to refrain from that haram of having a same gender relationship. Just like many people have. Allah tests everybody differently, right? Allah protect us from all tests. But some of us are tested with complete turning our backs on people for a certain commodity or certain wealth or whatever the case is. Some of us have some major anger issues that we have. We're individuals that may cause domestic violence, right? And I'm not saying that it's okay that people, but I'm saying that some people are tested with extreme tempers and not being able to rationalize and work within the limitations that they're given, right? And everybody's tested differently. Some people are tested with sicknesses. Some people are tested with many other things. Some people are tested with losses. What were the tests that Muhammad ﷺ was given? He was tested with all the people around him dying. Everybody. Even his children that he had. All of his sons died. He had to bury all of his children. And he had to bury his uncle and his wife and everybody around him was dying. Right? So everybody's tested differently. So to answer your question, it's best to seek out a specialist based on what your understanding with your parents are. And I'm not saying not to be open with your parents. I'm just saying it for the onslaught of them not being prepared to deal with this issue and pushing you further away from Islam. So to answer another question that you didn't ask, are you still Muslim if you have homosexual thoughts and tendencies? Of course you are. If you act upon it, is it haram? Of course it is. It's disastrous. Can you still ask Allah for forgiveness if you do so? Of course, it's still not as bad as shirk. But if you do end up falling into that lifestyle, number one, don't go announcing and telling people. Us as Muslims, we don't celebrate our sins. Number two, don't fall into the sin, a graver sin, that will take you out of the fold of Islam and telling everybody that it's allowed for a Muslim to practice an LGBTQ lifestyle and have same-sex relationships with your same gender and all of that and be a source of quote-unquote power for the LGBTQ community. No, that's something that is completely wrong. And because it is a specific evidence from Allah that it's haram, and you claim that it's halal, it's denying a verse of the Quran or many verses of the Quran and many ahadith, which takes you out of the fold of Islam, right? So we don't want to fall into that category, right? Another question is a very good question. How come nobody, this is more of an academic question, how come nobody has integrated ulum ad-din, meaning religious studies, Islamic religious studies, and so-called secular education so that 18-year-olds can actually know fiqh in detail before they go to college? Is it because we can either carbon copy old world madrasas or carbon copy the government factory model? Didn't Muslims used to be creative? Yes. That's actually the reason why there were Islamic schools, the formation of Islamic schools, right? Islamic schools are supposed to be the balance of learning secular education and learning your deen and fiqh and hadith and all of the above, right? What ends up becoming a dilemma is a majority of people are not going to be able to go to a private school because of tuition, because of distance, because of, right? But there are other institutions that are available to teach you your deen very, very simply. If a Muslim was to go to their local and nearest masjid and attend the durus and knowledge that's taught there, it still could be a good, very, very good place to start. That's why it happens in the masajid. A good thing to actually do, which is not always easy, is make sure that you attend Jum'ah. Jazakallah khairan. Allah bless you and your family. Jazakumullah khairan. Wow, that smells amazing. The Shai Adani, mashallah, my favorite. Oh, so, the attempt to tackle this through the masjids is very, very important, right? But is there an institution which is on a public level, free of charge almost, or a charter school level that teaches Islamic studies and secular studies? It's being worked on right now, but nothing, to my knowledge, has been developed. As far as a charter school, there's places in the East Coast and I think in Maryland that are working on a Muslim charter school which will teach Islamic studies, and other religions are okay to opt out of it. It's not, they don't have to attend it. But that is the reason and the inception of Islamic schools, meaning Islamic private schools. The next question is, I think it's a very great question. Why did ICW have a woman's shahada in front of the men in the men's section? Number one, she looked super uncomfortable up there, and she looked like a prop for ICW to look good. And two, more importantly, it goes against the ahkam of gender norms mentioned in Surah An-Nur and Surah Al-Ahzab. Now, I think this is a very important question because we shouldn't shy away from asking questions. Look, some questions are very difficult to deal with, and some questions are very easy to deal with. Some answers also are very easy to deal with, and some answers are very difficult to deal with, right? So I'll give you an understanding, and maybe, because there's a few sisters that had mentioned this to me also, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with asking a question. They said that when there was a shahada, right, in any masjid, for that reason, why would they have a woman stand in front of all of the men and give her shahada when she should actually be amongst her sisters in a more comfortable place, so we could set a precedent for her that if she felt discomfort, her coming into Islam should have been a comfortable situation, right? And every woman is different. Some women may be uncomfortable and some women may be comfortable. But for the most part, if you take any man or any woman, no matter how woke people believe they are and how shy they say they're not of women, some men will claim that they're not shy of women, which is false. Most men are, which is why you have all these tutorials on how to talk to women online. And then you have, and some women will say they're not shy of men, which is completely false, right? That's not true. That's factually and objectively not true. But the question is a very important question. So yes, the best practice that a masjid should follow, of course, is that a woman should take her shahada amongst her sisters. It's very, very important. But if you felt that ICW was using this sister as a prop for ICW, no, I don't think that's true. And it's okay if you feel that way, but I think that's factually not true. What ICW does and what most masjids do is they want to give people passion, especially on Jum'ah, that when somebody else becomes Muslim, right, like we should announce it and everyone should know they see this person again, they're from the masjid, right? That's true. But would a better way of modifying, not just ICW, every masjid, to have a nice setup where she can be amongst her sisters and a sister can give her shahada and we can hear it too, or we don't hear it, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I think that's a better option, of course. But, and you are very, very true. You are very right. In Surah An-Nur and Surah Al-Ahzab, what indicates is that a woman shouldn't unnecessarily be in front of the masjid and all the men are there. In the same way, I don't know about you guys, I wouldn't like to go in the women's section to stand there for 5 to 10 minutes. I would feel uncomfortable. I'd feel shy, to be honest with you. There's no shame in that game, right? I'd be shy, just like any man would have to stand in front of a women's section and give a speech, right? It just doesn't happen and most likely shouldn't happen, right? If we have other avenues. In situations where there is no setup and there's no other way, yeah, then that's different, right? But if we do have a setup, yes, inshallah, of course. But I think it's a great question, and I think for the future, that's something that, we can consider. And sometimes masjids are dealing with so many things, it's something they may not even considered. It's something they may not even thought about because, think about it. Like, recently I think it was in April Masjid, there was a person who ran into another person or tried to, I don't know the exact, reporting of what happened, and they had to call the police. And you know what? That's been happening for like 20 years in masjids. Masjids are worried about those things too. Do you think that a masjid, especially in the age, and I'm not making excuses, I'm glad this sister asked this question, because this questions, we learn through questions, and we have different formations through questions, right? But I'm just giving my brothers and sisters 70 excuses also. We're worried about shooters coming in sometimes, right? We're worried about what parking is going to be like. Is there enough people? Is the electricity working? Are the microphones working? The water situation? Are the floors slippery so nobody slips and falls? There's hundreds of things, right? But Jazakallah khairan for the brother or sister who asked, and the sisters who had mentioned this. Thank you for actually asking this, because maybe you're going to help us for the future, and Allah's giving you sadaqah jariyah for that. So, Jazakumullahu khairan. I'm going to take one more question, and we can take a live question or a few live questions, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. There is a lot of segregation in masjids depending upon the dominant ethnic group. Do you think it is recognized that reverts or converts that are not part of that particular ethnicity do not feel that sense of community? I agree. Do you think that somebody who reverted to Islam, do you think their life by any means is easy? Of course not. And we would be, as Muslims, foolish to tell them, after you become Muslim, your whole life is going to become easy from now on. No way. We should never make that mistake. I'm not saying the questioner is saying this, but that's not something that we do. Rather, after coming into the fold of Islam, this revert person needs so much support from us, because they're going to face something that we're never going to face. Number one, mother and father kicking you out of the home and ostracizing you. I knew a guy who used to go to Glenbard West in the 90s, right? Who became Muslim, whose father was kind of like from the Aryan Nation KKK family. He became Muslim in high school because of his friends. Because it was winter, sometimes, because he used to smoke, and everyone in his family used to smoke. He used to say, I'm just going out to have a cigarette. I feel like walking around. He used to pray and then have a cigarette, so he smelled like cigarettes, and then go inside of the house. When it was winter, what do you think he used to do? You know what the fiqh question that he asked us? Is it allowed to pray in the bathroom? Think about what he had to go through, but think about the dedication that he had. Did any of us ever have to pray in the bathroom? We know that you're not allowed to pray in the bathroom. But the fatwa that was given to him is, don't pray in the area where the toilet is, where you have to, but pray where the sink in that area is. Or the bathtub area where it's not the toilet. Because where the toilet is, that's where the dhikr of Allah can't take place. So even in the wudu area, right? If you want to do your dua for wudu, or if you want to do other adhkar, you should keep your voice very low, but don't do it in where you're sitting in the toilet, or rather where the separation is, where the sinks are. That's where you can do your dhikr and adhkar if you need to, inshallah. Especially if they're completely separated. Like you have the area just for toilets, and then you have a completely different room for where the sink and everything is. Some people, because of lack of knowledge, think that you can't do dhikr over there also. No, of course you can. It's actually an act of worship to do so, which is why masjids try their best to separate those completely, right? So the reason why I mentioned all that is, do they feel that sense of not belonging to that group in the masjid? Of course they do. Which is why our job as Muslims, number one, is to welcome them with open arms. Right? And there's something we have to be very, very honest about, right? Is that every single one of us in every culture that we have, whether you like it or not, has prejudices. I don't care what anybody says. Every culture, I'm a part of a culture, I'm originally ethnically Indian, right? I know people from all over the world. Everybody from every nation has some type of prejudices, which doesn't mean that, oh, it's okay because everybody does it. No, Islam is very different. And some people say, like, I know, how many of the Caucasian or white Muslims would you ask? I have many friends that are white converts, and many of you may also that are white reverts. One of the first things that people say is when they see a white person, oh, is he from the feds? Is he an agent? Is he from the FBI? Wal'iyadhu billah. This guy just left his entire family. And he's coming here for shifa of his heart. And you're telling him that he's an agent and he has to hear from other people? It doesn't matter what he looks like. It doesn't matter how many tattoos a revert has. That doesn't matter. When they come into the masjid, whether they inwardly are non-Muslim or an agent, that doesn't matter. You treat everybody like they're a believer. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. What's in their heart is between them and Allah. Because I know people who were agents that became Muslim, actually. Do you guys know that? How do you think people from the CIA and some of the feds that were working on terrorism cases that actually ended up becoming Muslim? They were planted in a masjid that everybody treated them so well, and they had a conundrum, well, if I become Muslim, I lose my job. Right? It happens. So just because somebody may be an agent, it doesn't mean that he can't become Muslim either, even though we should never think that, right? And the list goes on and on. That doesn't matter. Yes, there are ethnic groups that are dominant in masjids based on their culture. Fine. It's already here. Who cares? But it's up to that masjid and its administration and the people there. Because whatever the administration, the people of knowledge of that community set as a precedence, everyone else will. We have to make everybody welcome. Right? And what if it is? How many people do you know that you met them and you never met them again? Right? I know a brother personally. I met him after he became Muslim and he passed away a year later, and I was asking for him. I found out he passed away. Right? What if he was in a masjid and he had a bad experience from Muslims and he goes away at home and he passes away? Right? How would all those Muslims feel? So we have to think about every time we meet somebody, we have to meet them as if it's the last time we're going to meet them. No matter who they are, no matter where they come from. Right? And that's what opens up our gates of mercy and Allah's gates of mercy upon us. Do we have any live questions, inshallah? I had this brother, then can I get you, inshallah? Go ahead, brother. Bismillah. No, I didn't even start yet. Jazakallah khair. Yes, barakah.
Okay. So you spoke about qasr and jama'
Yeah.
when you're traveling, and you can do it like jama' muqaddam and jama' ta'khir. So let's assume that you're traveling to Ohio, as you said, and you start with Asr time. So you have done your Dhuhr and Asr, you're good. And then you continue driving.
But you started your safar with Asr? Or you got to Ohio at the time of Salat al-Asr?
So you are local, you went to Ohio.
Yes.
And you're coming back now. And you have done your Dhuhr and Asr. So you're good with Dhuhr and Asr. And while you're coming back to the area, Maghrib happens. Okay? You follow me?
Okay, so I'm going to restate what you said. So let's say I'm from Wheaton,
Yes.
and I prayed Dhuhr and Asr here.
No.
No, I went to Ohio.
Yes. You arrived to Ohio sometime in the morning.
Okay.
Okay?
I arrived to Ohio in the morning.
Yes. And Dhuhr happened.
Dhuhr I
So-
pray in Ohio.
Yes. You decided to pray Dhuhr and Asr
In Ohio.
in Ohio, whether muqaddam or muakhar.
Very
That's
good.
fine.
Combine the prayers.
Yes. But you started driving to Wheaton around Asr time, like end of Asr time, okay? And Maghrib happens while you're driving back,
Yes.
okay? And you will not be able to make it to Maghrib in the Wheaton area. And for some reason or another, you decide to make Jama' Muakhar when you arrive, okay? So Maghrib, you do not pray on the road.
I see what you're saying. Yes,
While
sir.
you're traveling.
Yes, sir.
So you arrive here sometime towards 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. Maghrib has
Happens.
expired.
Isha time has already happened.
Are you going to do qada or you do jama' muakhar?
Very good. You do Jama' Mu'akhar without the Qasr. Without shortening your Isha.
Okay, so
Because you're
are
muqim now.
You're still good as far as the
Yes, because you were still traveling when time came in. Jazakallah khair, that's a great point. And just to add to that, even the starting of the safar, Imam Hanifa rahimahullah, and we have min Sadat al-Shafi'iyya here also, we have our Shaykh here who's from the Shafi'iyya. He can answer for the Shafi'is if he likes. Please, actually, so we can benefit from your knowledge, ya Shaykhna. But for the Hanafis, I'll start off with this, is according to Imam Abu Hanifa, when you're going to travel and you leave your home, you're actually considered a musafir. When you leave your home and there's no turning back. even if you're within the 48-mile radius. According to one of the opinions of Imam Abu Hanifa, right? So there's lots of leeway even when it comes to this. But when you return and you're in the place of your iqamah, where you no longer shorten prayers anymore, right? You would, if you reach home, it's one understanding. If you haven't reached home yet and you just want to pray Isha and you haven't gotten home yet, you can combine the prayers, right? And shorten, Wallahu alam, according to Imam Abu Hanifa. But if you enter your home and you're good, or basically your place of living, you would pray, you can combine both of your prayers, but you would pray them extended. What about the Shafi'is, ya Shaykh? If he comes back home,
he can make jama both of them as a jama ta'khir, but you have to complete the Isha 4 rak'ah and Maghrib 3 rak'ah also.
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh. And by the way, if anybody has any, sorry, I'm going to put you in an uncomfortable situation. We have, mashallah, from us an amazing Shaykh and scholar who also used to work with the Darul Ifta in Egypt. So if you have any questions, even fiqhi questions, more in depth than I can, he's an encyclopedia compared to me. And so if you have any questions for him or any Shafi'i specific questions or anything, you can ask him, inshallah. And if English is not his first language, if he has any issues, we can help him translate too, inshallah. But sorry to take this off of me and onto you.
Sorry, I have something to ask in the same topic. Let's say you're traveling for 2 weeks, right? So what's the time, like how many days can you do qasr? If you're going for 2 weeks, is it 3 days or 2 days or?
Very good. We'll start with the shortest number of days because the Shafi'is and the Malikis have the shortest number of days. So he's asking, how many days can I do qasr?
Yeah.
And the day when you came back, and 3 days stay at the place you are going to or went to. So totally 5 days.
5 days.
The day of
Traveling?
While you're traveling, let's say it takes more than a day to travel.
and 3 days stay.
Okay.
So if you start at the first day and stay 3 days after, and stay the 4th or 5th or 6th, more days after 3 days,
Yeah.
you have to complete your salah.
Okay.
Yeah, so according to Imam Malik, I think it's around the same. It's around 3 to 4 days, Allahu alam. But according to Imam Hanifa rahimahullah, is basically 2 weeks or 15 days based on a specific understanding that they have, and we can get into that detail later because you have to discuss usul a little bit in the Sharia of why he chose 15 days. Some scholars are that it's indefinite. Some of the Hanbalis and some of the Zahiriya, people who are from the Zahiri madhab, are that it's indefinite. As long as you're considered to travel forever, it can be forever after you come back home, right? So there's many opinions based on this. But one thing you have to understand is, let's just say when he talked about 5 days, and Imam Hanifa says 15 days. Let's say I'm going to Ohio, and I know I'm going to be there for a month. When I get there, I'm not shortening. During my travel, I can. But when I get there, because I traveled, because according to Imam Hanifa, more than 15 days, you're considered a resident. Right? And according to the Shafi'is, like you mentioned, 5 days and then 3 days. Yes, sir. Yes. You can pray. Yeah, if you're praying with Jama'ah, you pray whoever the Imam is leading. That's a great question. Yes, sir. Yeah. So if I'm traveling, I go to a masjid in Ohio, and I'm praying behind the Imam in the masjid, I pray the full prayer. I don't stop after 2 rakat to give salam. Yeah. That's a great question. I'll tell you why. There's difference of opinion on that. There's a concept in the Sharia called rukhsa and azima. Rukhsa means that Allah is giving you an opportunity, and azima means that it's what you have to do. They're both based on the same hadith of Rasulullah. The madhabs that separated based on this understanding, one understanding is, no, you actually have to only pray 2 rakat. Another madhab is of the opinion, and we'll get into the madhabs, is that it's a rukhsa. Allah gave you, it's better to pray 2, but if you want to pray 4, you can pray 4. So it's based on the understanding of, again, both of the jurists in Islam are using the same hadith It's the istinbat, the extrapolation that they took from the hadith, which guides their ruling. But, you know, it just depends. But don't think that you've done something haram if you prayed your whole salah. But is it better to obviously shorten your prayer because Allah gave you that? Yes, if Allah's giving you a discount, use it.
All right, I think this is a little bit different topic. This is a little bit of an open-ended question, so inshallah, if you could just give some general advice. So this kind of has something to do with patience. So inshallah, if you're
Patience, you said?
patience. If you're going through some difficulty, whether it's an exam or someone's in your family is sick, and inshallah, like the prescribed thing is to have patience. But sometimes as humans, we can we get angry, we get upset, we get sad. How do we kind of maintain that line of not going like over, or how can we be like just stay more patient?
And the reason I'm asking is you don't have to give me your specific or anybody else's specific example to ask you to say this, but do you think you give me a small example just so I can give it some context, and then we could talk about it in a general way?
For a lot of family members, for example, like if they're trying to get pregnant or they're having kids, and it's not happening or whatever the situation may be, obviously, they're upset, they're sad, they're hurt. They see people around them going through, having this miracle, but they're trying to stay patient. So how can, what's some advice?
Very good. That's awesome. The reason why I asked you for something specific is because what it comes down to is calamities, and when things don't go the way we planned and want, and how do we, work with that, and how do we come to grips with that, because that's what Allah decided, right? So the main goal here is to understand that on a general level, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one, tests everybody differently. And number two, everybody goes through calamities. And number three, everybody has a plan, but everybody's plan doesn't work out the way we want it to, right? So taking all three of these into consideration, kind of lumping them together, because they're all related to each other. One thing on a very practical level, and then we'll talk about verses of the Quran, is Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah, and many others, like Imam al-Ghazali, to something very similar, said that every time me or somebody I know goes through a calamity, I remind them of three things. Number one, it could have been a lot worse. I know that seems like elementary or oversimplistic, but if you think about it, it can be very profound. Number one, it could have been a lot worse. Number two, that the test that I'm having right now, it's in this dunya and it's not in the akhirah. And number three, the test that this test I'm having is not my test of wanting to leave Islam or Iman and forget about Allah and His Rasul. I'm still on my deen, but I'm just being tested on minor details here and there. Because everything's a minor detail compared to our Iman, right? But we shouldn't undermine when somebody's going through this difficulty. Now, to directly answer your question, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the question, it answers the question in the Quran. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, translated for you, says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses some people with males and some people with females. And He gives some people and He makes them that they're infertile or they may be sterile, right? And Allah creates people however He wants and whenever He wants, right? So one thing is that we have to be able to see, and this is not easy, but sometimes the heads of household have an influence in a certain way, and the mothers have an influence and the peers follow, is that in everything there's a blessing. In everything, right? If somebody can't have children, we have to understand that Allah tests us because He's preparing us for something else. That's one of the wisdoms of tests. He's preparing us for something else, and if this test didn't happen, we wouldn't be prepared what the other inevitable is, right? And the wisdom in that is that sometimes we ask Allah for something, and He grants us that in a way that's not actually answered because He wants what's good for you. Sometimes brothers want to get married, sisters want to get married, and it never happens. They have all the candidacies. They have the resume and the CV that proves that they're a prime candidate for marriage, right? But it just doesn't happen. Is it possible? Of course, that they made a dua. It's very possible. They made a dua for Allah to protect them and give them the best for their marital life, and Allah doesn't want them to get married because He knows what's best for them, because if they did, something could have happened, right? And the same thing happens with children, right? That somebody is really, really wanting to have children, they want to, like you said, experience that miracle, and it is from Allah. But Allah is not granting it to them, but imagine the patience that person has. Let's say they're never going to be granted children. Let's say that that's what broke their heart their entire life and they remained on their iman. That type of patience, especially for a mother, and on a different level, obviously for a father, but very, very similar, is that their patience, they endure that patience, that's enough rahmah for Allah to them to enter into Jannah without any questioning. Because that's something that like everybody around you, and it's the most halal way to worship Allah in the sense that you see children, they're a miracle for you and all that kind of stuff, right? So the first question, the first way to deal with this is for patience, is for the practical steps, is simple practical steps. Number two, look at other people, not that have more than you, that have a lot less than you. And number three, know very, very well that if Allah is testing you with something, He's preparing you for something else. Number one, He's giving you forgiveness, and He's preparing you for something else that's far greater than that. Right? I hope that somewhat answered your question, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
So Sheikh Ahmed, Bakrid is coming, right? So it's related to the Bakrid. There is a different understanding about doing the, in the household, the husband has to do, and the wife has to do separately, or both, even though wife is working or not working, right? Can you just briefly elaborate with different mazhab?
Very good. I can definitely, for the Shafi'iyya, inshallah, do you mind if you can answer that? I can go first, inshallah. But no, and I don't want to put him in an uncomfortable situation. The question was for al-udhiyah. If the husband is sacrificing because balagh al-nisab, and let's say the woman balaghat al-nisab, is it the husband that does it on her behalf, or should she do it separately? Qurbani, yes, al-udhiyah. Al-udhiyah meaning the sacrificing the animal on Eid. Udhiyah, ma'alish. No, he probably heard the Urdu version of it. Qurbani. Al-Qurban, يعني التقرب إلى Allah, from sacrificing. So the general understanding is anybody who's reached a nisab, meaning that they're qualified to give zakat, and they have the wealth, if they're going to sacrifice the animal, that it's not going to impede on their wealth that they go into shortage of money, then each and every individual, male and female, gives from themselves, right? So a woman would give a share and a husband would give a share. But is it allowed for a husband to take care of the share of his missus? Of course it's allowed, Islamically, right? Of course it's allowed. That happens very often, actually, right? So is it allowed? Yes. But if the wife says, I have a nisab and I really wanted to sacrifice, I haven't never done it, the husband obviously shouldn't say, no, I'm going to do it. If she wants to do it with her money or her wealth and even sacrifice an animal with her own hands, it's allowed Islamically if she wants to, no problem, inshallah. تفضل يا شيخنا, آسف.
If the question is about the udhiyah, as I understand, is it about udhiyah?
Udhiyah.
So at first we have to know what the hukm of udhiyah in Sharia. Is it farida or is it sunnah? First we have to know the hukm of udhiyah in Sharia, in Shafi'i madhab, and I think in Hanbali and Maliki, I don't know, Hanafi, inshallah, Sheikh, no. It's sunnah. So it's not, depend on you have more money or not more money. No problem if you, mashallah, have a wealth and you dislike to do udhiyah, but you lost the thawab or the good deeds from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a very important first. The hukm of
Very important. Jazakallah khairan for mentioning that.
Yeah.
I didn't even mention that. Barakallah feek. عشان كده أنت موسوعة بقى.
I'm sorry. This is the first thing we have to know about udhiyah. It's a sunnah, and if you sacrifice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you, mashallah, a very good thawab and good deeds, inshallah, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second, if you do udhiyah at your home, inshallah, for you and your wife and your kids, it's mashallah, it's enough. It not depend on that you work and your wife work or not. No difference between your wife work or not work, no problem. you can do udhiyah for you and your family, like our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did about himself and about his family. He said, هذا عني وعن أهل بيتي وهذا عن أمتي صلى الله عليه وسلم. This first one about for me and my family, and the second one for my nation or for my ummah, inshallah. That's it. Yani it's very inshallah easy, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for qabul, inshallah.
Inshallah. I have one more question, please, that came up, if you guys don't mind, if it's not a live question. Somebody had mentioned a sister, I'm thinking it's a sister, but it may not be, wallahu alam, that why is it, where did that go? I just had it. It's shuffling on me here because there's more questions coming in. Why is it difficult for a revert after the age of 50 to get married? Challenging for revert sisters 50 and older to get married to brothers their age, in addition to them not willing to marry outside of their culture. Yes, please. Bismillah.
Sit down there.
Just one word. We have to know why Allah Azza wa Jal create us. Is Allah create us for married and other things? Or Allah Azza wa Jal create us for something different? This is our goal and our aim in dunya, that Allah Azza wa Jal create us to do it. And the things like married, like where do you live, what's your work, or other things, it's maybe different between you and me and others. You can go and do, and other can't do. So the first thing we have to know why Allah create us. This is very important. If we know why Allah create us, inshallah we will feel comfortable about more things in our dunya.
Jazakallah khairan. Very true. Akramakallah. And did you say that you had input on the question about the sister? Added this to the udhiyah question? Oh, to the reverting question. Oh, very good. Okay, so I'm trying to make the link between the two. So, you mean the purpose of their creation? Yeah, Bismillah, min fadlik. Allah. No, this, subhanallah, lots of hikmah that the Shaykh just mentioned. Jazakumullah khair, Shaykhna. He mentioned what he meant by, and it's very actually deep and very profound, of what does Allah, why did He create us, right? What is actually meant, how we navigate through that in our specific relationships, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us not only just to worship Him, but He created something specifically for us that we're going to be doing, and for another goal. And obviously we don't know that goal. We work towards that goal. But if that goal is not attained, it doesn't mean that you're not worth anything. It doesn't mean that you didn't attain any goal, because sometimes we have to think to ourselves, Allah created me for something else. Allah is going to be using me for something else. And that's why it's important to spend ourselves with people to see, and spend ourselves with other initiatives to see where I can fit in, where Allah is going to help me worship Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I think that's very, very important, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, Shaykhna. No. Yeah. Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, the muhaddith of Sham, who passed away in the late 90s, muhaddith of Syria, he wrote a book specific called the ulama that never got married, ulama al-uzzab, right? And amongst them is Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, amongst them is Imam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, amongst them is Imam al-Nawawi, all the names that we've heard, right? Who a lot of, like Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam al-Nawawi, they passed away in their 40s, right? Subhanallah, they never got married. So to answer the question of the sister, yes, it is based on cultural norms, because the world is full of cultural norms. That after the age of 50, why is it difficult for a 50-year-old, for instance, revert sister to marry a 50-year-old man, right? Again, you can try, but you shouldn't think that if you don't do it, that you haven't attained, like the Sheikh mentioned, your goal of, which is worshiping Allah and what Allah has destined for you. Something else may be destined for you, right? But to answer the question more directly, yes, generally after a certain age, for revert men and for revert women, it's more difficult to get married. But is it more difficult? Is it different for women to get married after a certain age? In many cultures, yes, it is. That's very true. Does that necessarily mean that it's a bad thing? It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just the way the world turns. Should there be, obviously, people available to help these sisters that really need to get married, for somebody to look after them and spend companionship with and stuff, of course, we have to facilitate that too. That's very, very important. That's a part of the community, and we shouldn't stigmatize. What I will say about this question, which I'll finally say, and then we could take a break to get ready for Salah, is we should not stigmatize age of somebody if they want to get married, ever. And what race that they want to get married. Now, if your children want to get married, you should be happy. In this climate that we're living in, alhamdulillah, they're salim. Alhamdulillah, they want to get married. And don't push it away. You have to. We have to establish a Bayt al-Mal for them to get married. Reason being is, when a 17-year-old, I want you to think of the young and the people who are elderly. If a 17-year-old or a 50-year-old come to you to get married, we shouldn't shun them away. A 17-year-old, if you think that they're not ready to get married, because they are physically ready to get married, once they hit the age of puberty, they're physically ready to get married, but they need guidance. But we don't want to shun them when we say, wait till you're studying, what do you think you are, you're still a little kid, you can't even do this. No, we should take them seriously. Because now, who else are they going to open up to? You think if we shun them and tell them they shouldn't get married until they get their master's degree, you think they're ever going to come to you for issues again as a father or a mother? No, they're never going to come to you again. And let's just say that doesn't happen for a few more years. And like, frankly speaking, this dude's thinking, I got to be a virgin for another 15 years. You don't think he's going to go and commit zina? You don't think it'll be so much easier for him to have a girlfriend? It's going to be so much easier. You know why? Because it's happening to everybody. And it's become a norm now, right? It's becoming very, very normal. People have their phones, they're sending pictures to each other of everything, not just their face. That's nothing anymore, right? And I'll keep it a little easy because there's children in the masjid. So that being said, even if a 50-year-old sister comes to you, please facilitate, ask the brothers. This is what the Sahaba used to do. This is what Rasulullah used to do. A woman even offered herself to Muhammad sallallahu. And Muhammad ﷺ didn't want to marry her, so he asked the Sahaba, who wants to marry her? Because back then, again, it's the way Allah created us, this marriage is a responsibility. A woman needs a man to take responsibility of her. That's what original traditional understanding of Islam is, right? It doesn't mean that women aren't a great and vibrant part of the society. But in an Islamic household, yes, we make sure the men are responsible for the women folk and the children, inshaAllah. Jazakumullah khairan. If I went on a little bit, yes sir. One more question. What time is Adhan? 10:15? Okay, Bismillah. Ashan Muhammad Abdul Hafiz. Warag al-Asr.
I don't have a question, I have a comment that I think is very important to address. Sheikh Ahmed, you answered like a concern that somebody had regarding yesterday the sister who reverted and accepted Islam. So to clarify a few things, her name's Sister Sanat, and this is somebody I worked with, and she was like, alhamdulillah, she accepted Islam and was very interested after a few conversations that we had, and she did her research, blah, blah, blah. So long story short, whoever asked the question, I respect them for bringing up those concerns, but I think it's important to, again, clarify the facts. The first fact is ICW certainly did not use her as a prop. That is totally false. The second fact is Sister Sanat was not uncomfortable in any way being around a big group of men inside the musalla. Rather, she was nervous, is what she told me, because of course this was the most important day in her life. She made the best decision of her life, alhamdulillah. So of course there were some nerves associated with it. And I'm not a sheikh, so I'm not going to say was this haram or could things have been done better? I'm sure it could have been, right? But I think it's maybe just a little important to recognize that maybe the energy should be shifted more towards celebrating a beautiful day and moment like this, and recognizing that alhamdulillah we have a new sister that accepted Islam and in our amazing masjid here at Islamic Center of Wheaton. And I just wanted to clarify that those were the facts. She was not intimidated. As a matter of fact, she is very happy that she did it here, because she said that this community is very welcoming and loving, and so I just wanted to get that clear.
Jazakallah khairan. No, the facts are very important too. Barakallahu feek. Muhammad Abdul Hafiz, barakallahu feek. Ladies and gentlemen, inshallah next Saturday, again, please try to bring as many people as you can, because look, when it comes to the youth, many of us are adults or who have children. We're very, very much concerned about our youth. Please bring them and let them feel free to ask questions, even anonymously, inshallah. I think we can. I would probably have to leave exactly after Isha, so I guess, Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. I have a very good friend of mine who fears Allah, but he's becoming alcoholic. He's an addict. He's becoming an addict to alcohol. But he didn't tell me directly, but through a mutual friend I came to know this one. But whenever he speaks at the night, I know that surely he's alcoholic. So, but I don't know how to open it. Is there an obligation that I need to speak to him about this and make sure that he comes out of that sin?
Yes, so the job of every believer, Muslim, male and female, especially after the age of maturity, is to make sure that they do amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, right? That they encourage the good and forbid the evil, right? And it is also, many people use the hadith of Rasulullah where he said, if you see something wrong, what do? You stop it with your hand. If not, then with your tongue, then with your heart, and that's the weakest of iman. But that also has to be given context also. What that means is, if somebody does something haram, and you feel something in your heart that it's wrong, that means you still have some iman left. That's what that means. What it means is that if somebody does something haram in front of you, and you don't feel anything in your heart, that means your iman is escaping you, and maybe it's gone. When you get desensitized to things. So for you as a friend, or for anybody as a friend, whose friend is going through alcoholism or drug addiction, the first thing they should think of is, what is the best way to bring them back and take them out of this? Is the best way to bring them back through me because they respect me and they trust me, and if I tell them, it's going to help? Or is there somebody else I can bring to them that I know that they respect, and we can actually follow through, and they'll follow through, and we can make sure we're going to try our best. We have to understand, at the end, the khawatim, the ending of all this is from Allah. We don't know if we're ever going to solve any problem actually, but we have to try our best. So the trying the best is, number one, finding out who the best person or the best way to help this person. Maybe you have a friend that's a medical doctor that knows about addictions, but also is a great friend of his, and he's on the deen also. Maybe that's the best person for him, right? Maybe it's just a simple person, like he respects a lot, and he wants to hide it from them, and if they find out, maybe he's going to stop it because of the shame, right? We don't know. So we have to assess that situation very, very closely. But to answer your question, as a friend, if you consider yourself a friend, he considers you a friend, and you can approach him, and I think you should, that would probably be the best thing, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.
Yes, real quick, I just want to let everyone know that inshallah this program will be every Saturday after Salat al-Maghrib. So inshallah, please do your best in joining us every Saturday after Maghrib, where Sheikh Ahmed will be answering all these questions. Jazakumullah khair.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح